Hello and welcome back to the show, World War II Books, Where to Start. I'm your host, Walter Cronkite. And today we're going to do a top 5 list of the best books I read in 2023. Not necessarily published this year because I don't keep up with the current new releases. There's just no way to do it. And I fiddle-faddle around and I hop from topic to topic in the war to keep it fresh. So, I got some old titles, some newer titles, but nothing from this year. First, honorable mentions, and I didn't put these on the list because they were repeats for me. I didn't think it was quite right to do top 5 that way. I wanted to do new reads only for top 5, so honorable mentions. We'll start with Inferno by Max Hastings. General history of the war, can't go wrong. It's a brick because it's general history, but it's awesome. He's a great writer. And then number 2 for honorable mentions, Black Thursday by Martin Caidin. It's an oldie but a goodie from 1961ish about the Schweinfurt raid. Aerial combat, very good. And then number 1 is To Hell and Back, Audie Murphy. I don't have a hard copy of that. Again, I've recommended that over and over as one of the best personal memoirs I've ever run across. And if you have any liking for audiobooks at all, you should do that version because the narrator is top notch. All right, so on to the actual top 5 of 2023. Number 5, Agent Sonya by Ben Macintyre, Moscow's Most Daring Wartime Spy. From 2020, 338 pages. Ignore the little blurb there, Most Daring Wartime Spy. That's typical publisher hype. Ben Macintyre has made virtually his entire career off espionage, British espionage, and he's very, very good at it. He's got one off that I didn't enjoy, Rogue Heroes, about the SAS, which apparently has turned into a very successful streaming series, BBC or Netflix, I'm not sure which. But I thought that book was terrible, but the series is very successful. But, he makes his bread and butter with British espionage, and Agent Sonya is fantastic. He really goes to almost novelistic talent level here, relating her life story. And if you do the audio of this, he narrates the book himself, and he does very, very well with it. Many author narrations of audiobooks I'm not too wild about, but Ben Macintyre does a really good job of it, save for his pronunciation of city of St. Louis. He thinks it's St. Louis. That's an oddity. But anyway, Sonya was a Czech-born woman who was beaten up by a policeman in the 1920s Berlin, and that turned her into a flaming communist, and she remained a communist the rest of her life, and was a very successful spy, recruited and put into various places. She was in China, Poland, Switzerland, U.S., and Britain. She was all around and never got caught. She was developed by Richard Sorge of Japanese spy fame, and was his lover briefly. And she had just a wild life, always one step ahead of the police in all these countries, and eventually escaping to East Germany when the house finally collapsed on her post-war in Britain. She was the runner for Klaus Fuchs. She was his handler. So she's got a really big claim to fame there. And she ended up being a writer and a novelist in East Germany after her spying career was over. Very, very different kind of spy story. Top notch, I recommend it. Number 4, Ivan's War by Catherine Meredale from 2005. That's 462 total pages. I don't have a hard copy of that in front of me. Ivan versus Fritz, as I framed it in my previous video about this earlier in the year. The common story of the Russian soldier. Trials, tribulations, training, political indoctrination, what they went through in the 20s and 30s in the Soviet state, and their wartime common experiences. It's a fantastic look at ground level infantry combat and life in the trenches, life on the attack, and under the Soviet system. Very, very well worth the read. Number 3, a memoir, because I'm a sucker for memoirs. First Light by Jeffrey Willem. This is from 2002, 338 pages. He was a Spitfire pilot during the Battle of Britain, served in Malta briefly before illness put him off combat flying for the rest of the war. He did train and was a post-war test pilot. But he was a very young man, 18 years old, not sure he was up to it. Very naive, coming out of a very stable home, and right into combat training. He had the benefit of having an extended period of training before he was thrown into combat. Later on in the Battle of Britain, they were rushing people into fighters that had 20 or 30 hours or less in Spitfires. He had benefit of better training time in full flight school before he was thrown into the melee. And his memoir is visceral. It's very emotional, and the joy of flying comes through clearly. The stress of dirty weather and the uncertainty of every takeoff is your last, and the wild scrum of aerial dogfights. It happens so quickly at 300 plus miles an hour, and you just don't know where the bullets are coming from sometimes. Very well done, and he only had 2.5 confirmed kills during the war, so he never made ace. And he wasn't overly proud of his kills. The one he thought was kind of straight up murder. He was just chasing a reconnaissance ME-109 out to sea in very bad, dirty weather. The guy was just running for home. He never knew where Wellham was. He may not even been aware that he had anybody on his tail. And Wellham just blew his plane up in a very, very short burst. And Wellham just really thought that was kind of, it was war, but it was murder too, and he never felt quite right about it. So I really recommend that as a top-notch pilot's memoir. Outstanding stuff. Number 2, Mengele by Gerald Posner. It's the complete story, as opposed to the incomplete story. From 1986, 325 pages, main body text, and that's, of course, the infamous photo of Mengele in his full SS arrogance right there. Can't beat that. Never looked like that after post-war. Mengele is infamous as the angel of death in Auschwitz. Recruited first as a doctor on the Eastern Front, he won the Iron Cross first and second class there. Details are a bit sketchy, but then he went on to be posted to Auschwitz for medical research on the prisoners, and he had free reign to do whatever he liked there, and he did. The details are complete Nazi horrific. It's what you expect and what you think of as the prototypical and cliche Nazi doctor. Yeah, that was him. He was the mold. And oof, it's brutal stuff. This post-war stuff and invasion from capture by the Allies in Libya and South America is, for me, the most interesting part of his bio, really. I know I'm kind of fascinated with him because he was under the radar at many points, living under his own name, and even going back to Germany at one point under his own name to visit his relatives, and was never caught. Now, there's obviously a lack of will to give a damn about Nazi fugitives in Germany in the 70s and 80s. Understandable, I get it, but still, by the time America picked up the idea, yeah, we should get this guy, it was too late, and just no real effort to ever coordinate and get Mengele. Mossad claimed to have been very close to getting him in the 70s or 60s, I should say, and they were focused on Eichmann. They wanted to get Mengele at the same time. They kind of bungled it overall, not having enough resources on the ground to do it. They may have come close again later. They were never quite sure. But again, lack of willpower there kind of let him go off the hook. And you would think he would have been caught with his extensive contact with his family back in Germany and the money flowing back and forth, along with his handler. You know, they could pick up the handler's trail at any time, and with using modern surveillance methods, even in the 70s, 60s, and 70s, you think they could have got him if there had been any real willpower to do so. But he lived to be an old, bitter man, lonely and afraid, and went swimming one day off on the beach and had a stroke in the water, and that was it. So it's just kind of one of the most bizarre endings for a fugitive Nazi war criminal, not what you would expect his life to have played out as. And it's Gerald Posner does a really good job. I should have mentioned he also had a co-author, John Ware. Don't want to short that guy. Okay, so that was number 2, very good stuff, Mengele. And then number 1. Ravensbrück. I have a tough time saying that. Ravensbrück, Sarah Helm. Life and Death in Hitler's Concentration Camp for Women. From 2014, 658 pages, main body text. And kind of in the overwhelming literature of the Holocaust, Ravensbrück does kind of get lost in the muck. It has been mentioned before. She kind of claims it's utter obscurity and kind of never heard of before, and she's the first one to ever detail it. And well, that's a bit overblown. That's publisher hype, and she wants to. It's like climbing Mount Everest. You need a reason for someone to sponsor your butt to go up to the top of Mount Everest. It costs $100,000 or more these days, so you have to be the first whatever to ever do it in order to justify the sponsorship. And the same thing with World War II publishing. The crowd is so fielded, and it's 80 years old now. You have to have some kind of big hype headline to justify the publisher going, okay, yeah, we'll do this. So while that's overblown, the story itself is fantastic. She's a really good writer and very, very sympathetic to the material, and very thorough. Very thorough. And there's a big focus on the medical experiments on the women there in Ravensbrück with the gangrene infections, which I think that's the first time I've ever seen them really gone through in such detail. And it's worthwhile almost alone for that. And as I said in my deeper review of this, she does kind of lose the thread in 1944 and early 45 when the chaos of the Reich was kind of confusing matters. And some of the records probably aren't exact, and nothing to blame her there for. You'll see that commonly as the Reich kind of disintegrates in late 44 and early 45. There's a certain amount of jumble to everything that's going on. So aside from that little caveat, excellent, five stars all the way. So that's my top 5 there for 2023. There, I can talk. Hope you found something there you like, and check me out again for another video another time. I also got a top 5 worst coming. So stay tuned for that. Until next time, I'm Walter Cronkite. Happy reading.